Well, it's nice to virtually meet you too.
Yeah, nice to meet you. I'm Christine.
And I'm Jacinta. So,
Nice to meet you. I'm Alex.
Yeah.
My name's Alex Rosenberg or Alexander Rosenberg. I've lived here in Philadelphia for over 10 years. And I was born in Rhode Island, but I've never lived anywhere for more than 4 or 5 years sequentially until moving here. So I kind of feel like I'm the most from Philly than anywhere else. I'm an artist, educator, writer. I teach as an adjunct at community college in South Jersey. And yeah, mostly I'm just here in Philly making work.
could you tell us what your typical art practice looks like and what you applied with? Could you tell us a bit about some of those pieces?
The defining kind of characteristic about what I do in the studio when I try to talk about it is that I work with glass. Or that I have a studio practice that's based in glass. That being said, I consider my work to be kind of project-based, meaning that the kind of, rather than focusing on a particular material or process, those things are kind of defined by the theme or the subject matter of what I'm working on. But also having this studio practice based in glass, it kind of allows me to view the world and kind of access other material and subject matters in what I would call a glassy way. So I'd say that kind of like, whatever it is that I'm working with, it's kind of through the figurative lens of that material.
Yeah, there was the one, the built, unbuilt square piece.
That was, I was so fortunate to be involved in that project. I've always been excited about working with kind of history and working in public spaces and kind of site specificity. But it's only really been the last few years that I've started to be able to work like with the sites and the scale and kind of the access that I've really been excited about. So that one was commissioned as part of this curatorial project called Monument Lab, which was curated by Paul Farber and Ken Lum, a bunch of other exciting and really kind of high level artists were involved in it in a way that was kind of, intimidating. But I think I got really lucky getting on kind of early as a local artist and then got to be kind of more involved in this international group of names. But it was asking people to kind of reimagine the idea of a public monument for kind of contemporary Philadelphia. The site that I ended up with was Rittenhouse Square. I think what I was doing at the time was esoteric enough that they were kind of like, well, he likes history and he does lots of stuff, and this site is historic and has lots of stuff. And obviously in a much more sophisticated way than that, but that's my kind of Cliff's Notes version of it. Looking at the history of it, it's crazy. Like Philly's a planned city. There were maps of it in the 17th century before like it existed as anything, but like with the kind of grid and where these different squares are. And the thing about Rittenhouse Square, is if you look at it, is it's just like been in flux so much. Like it started as one of the most kind of rough and dangerous and kind of poor neighborhoods in the city, an adjacent neighborhood called the Devil's Pocket, because it was this kind of colloquial thing where you'd be like, I wouldn't go there. The people there would steal a watch right out of the devil's pocket. And then, over the last presidential election, when the DNC was here, the highest level of ticket you could get for that, where you would, sit with Hillary Clinton, was called the Rittenhouse, which is like reflective of the fact that it's like, one of the most fancy and expensive places to live in the city. That and the fact that it's like had all these things that were proposed and then kind of canceled, or that were like installed and moved or defaced and restored, that kind of ended up being what I wanted to make the project about. I wanted to figure out a way to look at all of these like multiple iterations of a site on top of one another as if they had kind of all happened and none of them had happened. And the way that we kind of figured out to do it was through an augmented reality interface. So I had these, what were previously coin-operated viewfinders, like what you use to look at a scenic vista. We took the coin-operated part out of them, so it's free. And inside was this interface where you could swivel it around and see the square overlaid with these kind of animations and images of like these different iterations of what had happened and what could have happened and didn't. Eastern State Penitentiary is, for those that don't know, it's like if anybody went to grad school and read Foucault, like it's the panopticon that the essay is about, which is like an architectural paradigm where like a single person can have a lot of control over a lot of other people through the kind of promise that they could be seen. Also, like the other people being controlled like can't see or interact with one another. There's kind of a lot of stuff with it. It's located in the middle of the city, and it's made out of wissahick and schist, which happens to be the same material that you would climb on if you went outdoor climbing in this area. And it also is a ruin. It closed in 1971 and just kind of was left to languish and wilder at that time. And so, it's a National Historic Landmark. So there's all these kind of restrictions in trying to conserve and preserve what it is as this kind of hybrid of both like kind of a natural and a man-made site in this kind of ruined state. So taking all that stuff into consideration and also being like a hobby climber, every time I look at it, I thought about what it must be like to climb on those walls, and that fantasy must have been shared by at least some of the people, that spent time there in incarceration. My proposal was to climb it like a natural site and make, using this idea of clean climbing, which became popular the year after the prison closed its doors. And that ethic overlaps perfectly with kind of the conservational restrictions in place on the site. So I was going to find and climb like every possible route on the exterior, from the interior to the exterior of the exterior wall of the prison, name them, rate them. There's something called the Yosemite Decimal System, which is for like America's contribution to climbing history. That's how we rate climbs. And then there's like these guidebooks that are made of any different natural site that you go to. So I wanted to make a book like that. And then there's an installation in the cell with the gear. I wanted to manufacture it out of what people would have had access to when they were in that institution. There's also like incredible archival resources there. And I was able to get access to the warden's journals, which have notes of different over-the-wall escapes. And I was able to kind of name the climbs and have excerpts from that in there. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like an amazing experience. To me, like in all my work, I'm looking for this kind of connection, this impossible connection, like kind of through space, but especially through time. The experience of getting to climb, to move through like architectural space with my body is so unique. And like I don't know, I wish I would sure like to climb more stuff. There's this cool anecdote. It's on the audio tour actually that I didn't know, but like, the walls are 8 feet thick at the bottom. And so even though it's in the middle of this urban center, when you're in there walking around, you don't hear the sounds of the city. And it's interesting. You don't really notice it, but it kind of changes the experience of the site. But when you climb up, when your head pops over the lip, the sound of the city kind of comes rushing back to you. And it's this really weird sensory experience where you're kind of like, have to pause for a moment and you see where you are and you kind of look behind you and see the, West Philadelphia. And then there's the kind of the following thought is like the only other people to have ever experienced this kind of sensation are the other people who kind of escaped over the wall in this way.
Yeah, climbing is like it's like high intensity physical narrative. And I like how you've woven these things with actual historical narratives. I do have a question actually about what you were talking about. Could you
Please
explain what clean climbing is?
There's an essay written in the 1972 Chouinard Equipment Catalog, which is like what basically Patagonia is today. Environmental conservation was like already a thing in the 70s for sure, but like people weren't really thinking about rock as part of that. Like the way climbing used a lot of equipment that involved like kind of chipping away and drilling holes, and the climbers started to realize that like the rock was changing, by the way that they were using it. So the Chouinard Equipment Catalog developed new types of protection which could use kind of the natural features of the rock so that people didn't have to drill holes and hammer stuff into cracks and stuff in the way that they kind of were. And there's this essay by Yves Chouinard and Doug Frost, I think it was, called The Whole Natural Art of Protection, which was kind of imploring people to see the rock as something to be conserved, and also kind of saying, hey, check out this new stuff. We don't have to live this way anymore. It's kind of closely related to what people today would call like trad climbing, where there's lots of like, I actually have them all hanging on my wall over here, but like all these kind of cams and chocks and things that like kind of fit in cracks so that when you fall, it catches you.
I mean, I would love to know what you're working on now or what you're doing to stay creative during this time.
This is such a weird time. And, I guess I'm fortunate to be in kind of a community of artists and creatives that I don't want to say like thriving, but, you know, whose practices aren't necessarily determined by access to, like, very adaptive practitioners, I guess you could say. And that's kind of the thing that's always been the case with my practice, is like, you know, just like I was saying in the beginning, rather than kind of relying on a certain process or material, it's kind of, I like working with what's around, you know, and that's why I like doing residencies or like going to different facilities or institutions and kind of feeding off that. It's exciting to me. So I don't see this as like particularly different from that. A lot of stuff, I'm also teaching, I'm just finishing up the semester. So there's like a lot of stuff that I've been doing that's kind of like, well, I'm asking students to do this, so I'm going to do this. One of the things we did was maybe Caitlin Pomerantz, who you're also interviewing, wrote something for, I think it was like hyperallergic or something like that, about like teaching during quarantine. And she was quoting this Miranda July story that I really like, about, is basically this like first person narrative about living in a landlocked place with no pools and trying to teach this like geriatric swim club how to swim with no water. And I don't know, I think it's very like apropos of kind of art practice in general. So I was kind of giving that to the students, and I was like asking them to kind of do a process minus the most important ingredient. For me, I've been kind of slowly working on this collaborative project that we want to get some funding for with a close friend of mine, about tardigrades, the water bears. For so long, I've been wanting to have access to like a very powerful microscope to take like video footage of these little guys like swimming around. And I was, you know what, that's going to be my thing. So I made this kind of super lo-fi, slide that has these little, it's like shadow puppetry basically, that has these little, scanning electron images of water bears floating around. You know, I also think the kind of maintenance and improvement of the studio is like as much a part of practice as others. And I know like it's a little, you know, like Tom Sachs on his Instagram stuff right now, it's a little kind of like boys clubby, but I do like that, like those moments where there's downtime and I go back and like, you know, like fix some of the tools or like repaint the wall white and stuff like that. You know, it's like this pause that's kind of important. And the other thing is kind of like revisiting older projects and kind of seeing how they might relate in the new context. The one thing that I've been working on, I don't even know if I put it in kind of arts context, is I was kind of doing this project of like distributing these patches to try to raise some money for like PPE supplies for healthcare workers. And it was great. Like, we've got many hundreds of dollars and people were happy to have, you know, the support. But the image, it's from, I found this piece of like family history last year about a great uncle of mine who was part of the 3rd Auxiliary Surgical Unit during D-Day. So he was like performing surgery on a beach while they were being shelled, you know, storming the beach at Normandy. And the image, it was designed by Walt Disney, which is also like weird, kind of considering some of the problematic politics. But like, it's a picture of a guinea pig tied up in red tape, holding like a giant unwieldy scalpel. And I just like, so I saw that just kind of poking around through my studio. I saw these patches that I had made, and that image seemed so like perfectly representative of like the kind of chaos for kind of people that are working in that way right now. So I just kind of adapted it and started using it. And it's exciting to me to use the post office and be able to be in contact, you know, sending things out to people. It was like, felt really good for me to be like mailing letters a lot.
I agree. The post office has been really, really crucial during this time. Another question that we have is, in what ways do you think art and artists will be beneficial during this time?
You know, in a way, I think that artists are very well prepared for times like this. That's kind of been the conversation with the people that I've been kind of checking in with, where like, I mean, on the one hand, you see these kind of like armed protests of like not being able to go to Applebee's. And I think it's like shattering this myth that like the apocalypse was going to be won by people that were like heavily armed or had the most like Kevlar bodysuit. Maybe the reality is that it will be, you know, those that thrive will be those that are able to kind of provide meaningful lives for themselves, minus kind of the fluff or like, you know, going to watch sports ball at the bar. I hope I didn't just like alienate, you know, 1,000 people. But so in a weird way, kind of like psychologically and practically, like, you know, we are, I think as a community, we're used to like creative problem solving, and like we're always asked to adapt and to like deliver projects, you know, on time without like access to the materials that we need, or, you know what I mean? Or like the funding that we need to do it. Like, that's just the kind of perpetual situation that we exist in. And then I think that is like, I think we're seeing that the arts, you know, are valuable to kind of like a larger community during this time, because like it's what people are tuning into, you know, like it's where people are, but also like looking for answers, like creative problem solving in kind of a practical way, like thinking about, you know, ways to kind of grassroots source PPE stuff, but also like new approaches to like connectivity and like ways to kind of engage socially outside of what we're used to doing. Like, I don't know, to me, it seems to be one of the great privileges of being a part of a community like this, is there's like so much stuff that I get to do that people are just kind of coming up with on the fly, because that's just what we do.
Couldn't agree more. Well, and on that note, with the idea of coming up with stuff, what would be your dream project right now?
Oh man, you know, it was so nice to look at that question, because what I realized was like, I'm really lucky that the last couple years I've been kind of getting to do a version of the thing that I'd like to do the most. So the two things that are kind of, yeah, I mean, the climbing thing was awesome, because like it was really, I got this taste of like what it's like to be a sponsored athlete too, without having to be that good at it, at a sport. It was pretty interesting, you know, and I love this notion of kind of, it's not as much training as it is like, I'm excited about this idea of getting to learn and kind of condition and acquire skill in a way that's separate from like conventional academic knowledge. I do that. I'm a teacher. I write and stuff like that. But I think there's this kind of learning with our bodies that we do that there's not as much kind of language or knowledge about. And I find for me that's like some of the most exciting and rewarding research and practice that I get to do. So it's really great just to like kind of hunker down and like train for this thing for a year, and then all the kind of community and stuff that comes from that. And the same thing with, I mean, it's almost a little prescient. I have like the projects that are kind of coming up, although things are kind of in limbo right now, is as I have been doing this proposal that's kind of like looking at a post-human landscape and trying to think about ways to address kind of human needs like food, shelter, water, looking at that landscape, kind of taking like traditional bushcraft or even like indigenous technologies and switching out some of the materials for like human made or kind of industrial waste, you know. And so I'm in a holding pattern with Rare right now to work on that, which is super exciting. And I'm going to go to Australia to do some of that. So I guess it's like, I don't know. I'm just like, and you know, I'm in anticipation mode. So like, I'm still just like the most excited about that right now.
That's awesome.
That's really great. That sounds like a fantastic opportunity and project. Is there an artist or something going on right now that's really inspiring you or making you excited?
You know, I'm looking specifically at artists who are interested in like creating connection, and some that I've really been looking at recently are Christine Wang Yap, and she was so kind to host me for a studio visit recently in New York, so I got to see kind of what she was doing, and she's doing like Instagram live stuff. Definitely a good person to tune into, and Dario Robleto, who also has this kind of very like sentimental approach to kind of objects and people. I also like thinking about the super low tech approaches to kind of making videos or image making that I've been playing around with in the studio. I love this artist, Julian Mayer. I don't know how active he is, but he has some really exciting kind of analog riffs on the magic lantern or like the slideshow that I've been kind of looking at for inspiration.
The next question that we have is, what book would you recommend to an artist right now?
So I was thinking about, I already mentioned that little Miranda July thing, which I think is so great. But the first thing that popped in my mind, and I don't know why, but when I looked at the question, I haven't read it in ages, but there's a book about Ilya Kabakov's The Man Who Launched Himself into Outer Space. And like when I think about projects like that were like not only with kind of limited means, but also under like great kind of political oppression for inspiration, other people that kind of make, to me, like memorable and important work in kind of challenging situations.
Do you have any words of advice for artists, or what's the best piece of advice that you've been given?
I don't know the best one that I've been given right now, and it's going to like wake me up in the middle of the night tomorrow. I just think like whatever people are doing, it's okay. There was something, I was trying to find it a while ago for students about John Baldessari talking about boredom. And I can't find the exact thing, or maybe I'm like falsely attributing it to him. Maybe it's somebody else. But like the idea of just like going to the studio and getting bored, and then you start to clean, you know, and then you start to like fix stuff that's broken. And like, I think all of that is good and like on track. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think there's all this pressure on everybody right now. Like, what can you do with this? Or like all this extra time that you've been always wanting. Now you have it, you know, and we can do all kinds of different things like in support of kind of, you know, one goal, which is like, you know, having this kind of artful life.
Our last question is, you could live with any piece of art by an artist. What piece would you like to live with?
There's no cash. There's no ceiling.
So I was going to say, do you have it? is this available to me? That was a hard question. I was thinking, and what I was thinking, and it's kind of in line with like the other stuff we've been talking about, is like so much of what I value as like getting to be an artist is more kind of experiential, or like access to kind of a community, which isn't to say that I don't like stuff, but especially as a person who kind of very recently started like selling work, there seems to be this like, there's like stuff you can access with wealth, and then there's like stuff that you can access like by doing what we do. And I'm feeling super jazzed to be able to have access to the latter. That being said, I did get a chance to go visit this house designed by James Turrell in Japan, the one where like you have dinner and the roof opens up and like the sky face thing happens as the sun is setting. It was incredible. I was with this huge group of people. It was like a wedding situation. They were mostly non-artists. People were drunk, and everybody just shut up and like watched the sky for like 2 hours while this event was happening. And I remember it as a very, you know, as a very pleasant experience. So that would probably be on my list.
That's a great option. I love that. Thank you so much, Alex. That was really great.
It's really my pleasure. I'm so excited to like, you know, meet up with you in reality as a member of Phyllis Sculptors now.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care.
Nice to meet you.
Okay.